In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
What happens when you realize that working harder is not the answer? Alexandria Butler, widely known as Lexi B, is our guest this week on Money Tales. Lexi talks about her exhausting years of juggling two jobs just to stay afloat, and how a surprising layoff became the wake-up call she needed. Lexi decided she was done trying to do this alone and sought advice from a financial advisor. Understanding her goals helped Lexi break free from financial stress, focus on her priorities, and start building wealth. Lexi is a sought-after figure in the tech industry, renowned for her transformative work and exceptional ability to cultivate executive leadership and promote workplace equity. With an extensive background at prominent Silicon Valley tech firms, Lexi elevated her mission of empowering professionals to new heights by launching the podcast Sit with Lexi B. Bringing her unique blend of entertainment and expertise to the table, Lexi is poised to revolutionize the way corporate entities approach professional growth and development.
Here are 3 key money topics Lexi hits on in this conversation. First, how working with a financial advisor helps save her financial life. Second, how depending upon the terms, getting laid off from a job can sometimes provide financial breathing room. And third, how the financial planning process helped Lexi gain clarity on her career goals and aspirations because it allowed her to see the connection between her earnings, the lifestyle she desired, and her purpose. We hope you share this episode with a friend. Now on to our conversation with Lexi B.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager. Cami, on Money Tales, we talk a lot about how our experiences growing up impact our own personal relationships and views about money. So I was wondering, as you think about the family you grew up in, what are some ways in which you're different from a money perspective from the generations that came before you?
Oh, Sandy, I immediately go to something I've talked about before, how our messages were work hard and save for the rainy day, ongoing. And I understand why. There was absolute reasons for this from my grandparents, even for my parents. And I'm in a different situation. The world's different today. I'm really thinking about my money and my values. So spending is a value, not on frivolous things, but on experiences and travel. You and I have talked a little bit about this, how that was hard for me in my 20s to spend. I had to understand what was holding me back. So I definitely approach the investing in joy differently than previous generations.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. How about you, Sandy?
I come from a family of people who also have concerns about spending money and always look for deals and bargains. I got so upset as a kid of having to do all the discount shopping. And I just remember all the name brand jeans that I wanted as a kid, and I could never wear them. I always had to get the off-brand jeans. And I think that comes into play a little bit for me too. So I am more comfortable spending. I like to spend on my family. I bought my mom this beautiful bag that I knew she would never spend the money, even though she has it on herself, to have a bag like this. I bought it for her and she was so delighted. And I was recently rummaging through her closet when I was at home and I found the bag. She's never used it.
Oh, she protects it.
She does.
It's a prized possession.
It's too precious to use. So that was really interesting. I still haven't totally worked my way through all that, but I'm careful about what I spend money on. But there's certain things that I'm not careful because it just doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Thanks for bringing up deals. I have to share one story. My mom would go to Costco and she would tell my dad about all the deals she got, which were stuff that we would never use or couldn't consume for like 10 years. So finally, my dad started coining. They had a car with a tiny trunk and a car with a large trunk. She started take the Costco car, which was the car with the tiny trunk, because then she couldn't buy all the deals.
Should to limit herself. It's funny how psychology works with money.
Well, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest today, Lexi B. It's fabulous to be talking with you on Money Tales.
You as well. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Would you introduce yourself and share a couple pivotal moments that have taken place in your life that really influenced who you are?
I am a human first. I am a Black woman second, and I love being a Black woman. Specifically, my ancestry is of the kidnapping and enslavement of West African bodies into the American South. I was raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Right now, I am a leader in the tech industry working in AI safety and how we can make sure that as AI is built and all these new things are being implemented into people's lives from a consumer standpoint that have to deal with AI, that we are making sure that people are also safe. Like any wave of new technology that we've all been through, people make these amazing inventions. And there have been times where these new technology trends, safety is not in mind. And then a lot of people suffer, sometimes even death. And then companies say, oh, we should think about that. How do people say? I currently work for Microsoft and I actually work on the AI safety security team. And we are actually creating, thinking, thought leadershiping, all the INGs of what does it look like to make AI safe, not only the products that Microsoft builds and uses, but also the thought leadership, the government encouragement, the policy around the world. That's what I do.
I'm so glad you're doing that work. It's so important. It's so mind-boggling thinking where things are going with AI. Lexi, my dad, the Costco car man, also born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri.
Really? You come from good people, Cammie.
I do. Have you ever had deep butter cake?
You mean gooey butter cake?
Yes, it's so good.
Yes, it's the best thing ever. And whenever I go to St. Louis, I currently live in Oakland, California with my family. Whenever my parents come to visit me, whenever friends go to St. Louis, you have to bring me back a gooey butter cake and you have to bring back red hot riblets. Those are my two mandatory things in my house.
Our Uncle Charlie used to ship us a gooey butter cake for our birthday. It was such a treat.
That's a good move, Uncle Charlie. Yes. And it's weird, Cammie, because people always ask me how to describe it. And I'm like, I actually do not know how to describe a gooey butter cake. I just know that if you haven't had one, you have not lived a full life.
So true.
So you need to figure that out and go get one.
I think I'm in that camp.
Yeah, Sandy, we're going to get you one.
I'm missing out here.
I highly recommend put it in the freezer too. There's a little trick there. Lexi, tell us a little bit about growing up in St. Louis, Missouri. And when did money start having meaning to you? What was the situation there?
So it's interesting because as I was preparing for this call, I really sat and thought about me and my relationship with money. And I think the first time that I started having conversations about money was in my 20s, which is 20 years too late. I come from this very interesting family where my dad is first generation college. My mom is third generation college. I do not believe that having a college degree gives you more money. I do believe that we live in a society that until maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, in order for you to access more high paying jobs, you had to have at least a degree. And especially as a Black woman, because of the history of my people in this country being denied access to education, that's a very big thing. So my father comes from a poor family. His parents did not go to college and they literally made ends meet. And the one thing they did was figure out how to get my dad as a teenager into a private school in St. Louis. So even their understanding of money was, we don't have any money, but our son is going to a great school and hopefully that opens up doors. My mother comes from this family that's third generation college. They had a little bit of money. They had like 2.5 pennies. And so education was also very important to them. And they sent their kids to private school because they were like, we want this to be a conduit for you to be successful in however you define success in a capitalist society. But even still, her relationship to money, I think my mom was very much like you said, Cammie, save, save, save. So you have some for a rainy day. So my grandparents on my mother's side, they were saving, 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 not necessarily for a rainy day, but to put their kids through school. My father's side, there was not enough money to save. So it was work, 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 pray and talk to an ancestor, and hopefully this is all going to work out. Growing up, for me, no one ever had conversations with me about money. And to be frank, I grew up in an upper middle class household. I went to a private school, and I went to a school that other kids in my class, their parents were lawyers and doctors and baseball players and hockey players. So I went to a very economically driven elementary school and high school. It was very clear about that. And at not any time did I think financially I was different than any other kid. There was never a conversation at home when I came home and said, it's red shirt day tomorrow. There was never like, well, we can't afford that. There was never a conversation when I came home and said, I want to go to space camp in June. It was never to my face, oh, we can't afford that. While that is very, very beautiful, there was also never a conversation about money.
So it's just there. You didn't think about it.
It was just there. I just knew that if I needed something or wanted something, I could ask for it. And for the most part, it would show up. In my 20s, when I became an adult and had bills, and I was really bad with money, and I had to start figuring out, why am I so bad with money? Is when I started doing the deep work, because we didn't talk about money. I grew up in a household where it was, again, oh, I'm hungry. You're going to get pizza. Okay. And looking back, growing up, I'll be very frank with you. My dad's a doctor. My mom's a teacher. I was upper middle class financially. But now that I'm grown with my own kid, I'm realizing that my parents put a lot of their money in our education. And I use education as the general term to also describe after school activities. Now, when I'm grown, I look back on my life and I'm like, oh, there were high school kids that I went to school with that were going to like Italy and Paris for spring break. And I was not. As a child, to be frank with you, I never questioned that. I always thought that my parents prioritized education over everything else. Now looking back on it, I'm like, is it because my parents had a certain amount of money and they decided to prioritize that in certain places? But because that was so expensive, there wasn't extra money for things like that. I went to a school where girls had Louis Vuitton purses and things like that. And I always knew that I could not go home and ask for a Louis Vuitton purse at 16. I think my parents master manipulated that. Like, you don't need a Louis Vuitton purse at 16. Now that I'm grown, I'm kind of like, but even if I asked for it, could we afford to buy me a $6,000 bag at 16? I don't know. So that's my relationship to money. And so my first job out of college, I was making $80,000 a year, but living in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Sherlock, that's no money. Within 9 months of me working at this job, I realized that I needed another job to pay for my bills. I had student loans, I had a car, I had to pay for things, and I got a second job. So I did understand that. I did understand that having more money gives you the ability to do things. From 22 to 28, I literally worked 2 full-time jobs. I had my tech job at my company, and then Monday through Thursday, Saturday and Sunday, I was tutoring. I was a college counselor. I think a lot of people thought that I was just doing this because I was bored, or I was doing this to like do extra things in my life. I didn't tell a lot of people, but I was 100% living paycheck to paycheck. And there were many weeks where that college counseling money was paying for basic needs at home. If I did not have that college counseling check, I would not be able to go to the grocery store. I would not be able to pay my car note. I would not be able to pay my insurance. And so that's what I did. And then at around 26, I was like, I'm working too hard. I deserve to thrive.
It sounds exhausting, Lexi, as you talk about it.
It was exhausting. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how I did it. That's when I got my first financial advisor. So something in me said, you cannot sustain this. And then also something in me said, look, you work in the tech industry. Somehow everybody else at this company has figured out how to pay their bills with one job and go home at 5 o'clock and not have to work all these extra hours. So this must be a you problem. And so I literally hired someone to therapy me and teach me about money because the math wasn't mathing, or at least in my eyes, it wasn't mathing. And I wanted to be better so I could thrive in my life and enjoy it.
Lexi, thanks for sharing that, and good on you for finding help when you needed it. While you were having the dual job situation for many years and were really stretched and stressed trying to figure out how to cover all the bills, what were the emotions going through you?
Oh, so much anxiety. I haven't really shared these stories, which is why I'm so excited to be on this platform to share it more publicly. But the few people that knew about it, their first would say, oh, well, I don't want your self-worth to be impacted. And to be frank, my self-worth was never impacted. I never thought that I was unworthy. I never thought that I was a lesser person because I had money issues. But it was very clear in my head, I have to work myself out of this problem. I have to work more. So if I'm making X amount of money working 8 hours a day, then I just have to work 12 hours a day. And I think that when you're in your 20s and your prime, I'm now middle aged. I can't break it down like I used to. If you invite me to places, I need to be out by 9 p.m. and there better be convenient parking. I am only circling the lot 3 times and then I'm going home because to me, the ancestors are saying that I should not be here. So when you're in your 20s and you're just young, scrappy, and hot, you working 12-hour days is not that big of a thing. But then as I got into my later 20s, it was like, I'm getting tired. I'm tired of eating McDonald's and Taco Bell because I don't have time to make dinner because I have to go to the next tutor thing. I would like to go to happy hour with my friends on a Wednesday. I would like to go on vacation. It was those kinds of things. I was anxiety filled. And frankly, what happened is that I'll never forget March 2016, I got laid off from a job. And what they did not know was that I had another job in place. Layoffs can sometimes be a great thing financially. From March until November of 2016, I was getting paid by 2 companies.
Because you got a severance?
Because I had a severance. And because the day that I got laid off was actually the day that I was going to tell my company I got a new job.
Oh, timing's everything.
It was great.
Did you find you're like smiling? You're like, oh, I'm so sorry.
It was hilarious because my director, when he told me I got laid off, you could tell that he was trembling. I remember in the conversation, he was like, you're taking this really well. And I was like, you got to do what's best for the company. But what really struck me about those 2 weeks is that, again, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I got laid off, I think, March 2nd or March 3rd. And that's very important because March 1st is rent day. And so before this happened, my anxiety would come is that every first of the month, my whole check damn near would go to my rent, which means I don't have money for 2 weeks. So if you wanted to hang out between March 1st and March 14th or 15th, when that next Friday came for pay, I couldn't. I was eating PB&Js. I was eating Eggo waffles. I was eating ramen. And then when that mid-month paycheck came, I could ball out a little bit. I get laid off the beginning of the month. I have no money. Money's coming, but right now I have no money. I have this new job coming up. And as we all know, when you start a new job with new money, you don't get into payroll for like the first 3 weeks. From a long-term money perspective, this is great. I'm about to get paid. From a short-term money perspective, what am I going to do between March 2nd or 3rd until mid-April? Because I just paid my rent. I have no money. Now, the good news about my severance was that they kept us on payroll for 60 days. So I got laid off March 2nd. I got a paycheck that 15th or 16th. But I distinctly remember those 14 days in between, I couldn't do anything. So now, not only do I not have money to do stuff, I have time to do stuff because I'm not working. And I was so mad. I can't go on a trip. I lived in the Bay Area. Napa's down the street. I can't afford that. And so I now have time to enjoy my life because I'm not working, but I have no money to do it. And that's when I went on some email list that I was on. I think it was like young millennials in the Bay or something. I just typed an email and I was like, I need a financial advisor. What are we doing? Because at least I can do is try to, between now and this new job, figure it out. But I remember that was a really hard time because then I started the new job at the end of March. And again, when you start a new job, payroll doesn't hit until 3 or 4 weeks after. And I remember going to that job. They gave us free breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I lived about 40 miles away from the job. So I was never there for dinner. I needed to go home. And I would fill up on lunch because I didn't have money for dinner until that first paycheck hit. During that time was my realization of I should not have to live like this. I came from this very famous tech company. I'm currently at Airbnb, which at the time was the hottest startup in the world. And I'm sitting here pretending that everything's all good. And I have all this anxiety around how am I going to eat dinner while I'm sitting here talking to my new Airbnb colleagues. And again, we're not talking about money at work, but I'm just imagining they are not having these conversations. And that's when I got myself together.
Lexi, it's so amazing. You painted this picture of this tension between time and money, that now you finally have time, but you don't have the money. Tell us more about working with a financial advisor. What did you start chipping away at? Tell us what you feel really brought some insights and helped you change trajectory.
I always tell people, if you are not having money conversations at home at 5 years old, then you need to hire a financial advisor. And this is why. One, you're going to learn very quickly that it takes money to make money. And you need to know that. So this concept of save all your coins is great. And that is one of the foundations of your money journey. But if you want to live a certain type of lifestyle, but you're only making $80,000 a year, you can only save $80,000 a year. But if that lifestyle you want is $100K, you need to make more money. So one, it takes money to make money, as in outsource things that you are not good at. If you are not good with money, go find a financial advisor. Two, you may need to make more money. This model that I really think came from like the Depression years, whenever I would talk to my grandmother about save your money, I'm not saying do not save your money. I'm not saying being frivolous. But again, if you make $80,000 a year and you want an $100,000 lifestyle, I don't care how much money you save, you're not going to have a $100,000 a year lifestyle. And then two, you need to figure out your why. And so my financial advisor, I remember when I first met with him, he gave me a lot of free sessions because I had no money. And I remember he said, just come to my office. And I would go to his office. And I think I went about 5 times in between leaving that first job and getting my first paycheck at Airbnb. And he would put me in this large conference room. I'll never forget this large conference room with a big white board. And we never talked about money. And that was really eye-opening to me because he was like, I'm not going to talk to you about money. I'm going to talk to you about what you want. And he was the first person that told me money is a tool to get what you want. And we live in a world where most people don't know that. He started mapping out my life. He told me once, he was like, do you want to get married? I was 20. I said, I don't know. And he's like, are you dating someone that you're thinking about that? And I was like, I'm casually dating, but I haven't found someone that I'm like, I could marry this person. And he's like, but you're not anti-marriage. And I remember I said, why do you care about my love life? And he said, because marriage is a business transaction. So we need to know if the life that you want will also be supported by another person, whether they're bringing in $1 or 18 million or just you. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. He said, do you want to have kids? And I was like, I don't know. And he said, okay, well, you don't have to know, but just understand if you want to have kids and you want your kid to go to private school, as an example, there's a certain price tag for that versus public school. Do you want a penthouse apartment in New York? Or do you want a 3-bed, 2-bath in Memphis? Or do you want to live in a 600 square foot apartment in Birmingham? And for him, he would always say, there is no judgment to any of these answers, but you have to tell me what you want. Do you want to go on vacation once a year? And I was like, I'd love to go on vacation. How many times? Are we going to the Maldives or are we going to Napa? You live an hour and a half away from Napa. You don't need a flight. And if we're going to the Maldives, are we first classing it or are we doing economy? And he was the first person in my entire life that really said, I'm asking you these questions for you to figure out the kind of life that you want. It does not matter what kind of life you want, but you need to know what kind of life you want. And if you can navigate and understand what kind of life you want, then we can talk about money. And fun fact, what a lot of people don't realize is that conversation that I had with him was also the first conversation that I look at as a career conversation. Because until that point, I was just doing stuff at work because someone told me to do it or because I was good at it. And the reason why I got a new job, something in my spirits said, you need to get a new job. We think something's coming down. There was something in my body that knew a layoff was coming. And I knew that in December 2015. This is now March 2016. I did not get a new job because this job is not doing what I needed to do. I did not go look for a new job because I was thinking this manager is not progressing me of where I want to go. It was this man in this financial building who was not only having a conversation about money and lifestyle, but he was requiring me to have a conversation of, so what does your career look like and what is your why? And I think those conversations go hand in hand with money. And so I did this with him. And that really started my journey of not only understanding money, understanding investments, understanding it takes money to make money. So stop being so cheap all the time. If you can afford to outsource this, do it. Because if you outsource this, do you have more time to make money? And honestly, really was the conduit in conversations around my love life, because it was also the first time where somebody was like, if you would like to be in a lifelong partnership or a long-term partnership, we're not talking about money, we're talking about lifestyle. So you actually cannot have an adequate conversation with another human being about romance and like, are we going to go together for a long time if you don't even know what a long time looks like for you? Because it doesn't matter how much you're in love with someone. If they want a 3-bed, 2-bath in Memphis and you want to live in a penthouse in Venice, you may not go together. I don't care how cute they are. There was a lot of evolving conversations that somehow all brought money in perspective, but really truly brought, what do I want out of my life? And then the question was, this is the life that I want. This is the kind of person that I want to live it with. Okay, cool. How do I fund it? That was the conversation.
It sounds like your advisor is really helping you piece together your vision, your values, your purpose, your why all together, and then looking at money through that lens, which is so important. And I'm so glad that he got you talking about money. When you talk about life, you're talking about money. They go hand in hand. I'm curious, Lexi, as you had this initial inspiring, life-changing money conversations with your advisor, what did that do to you in terms of your willingness to have money conversations with other people?
Oh my gosh, it opened the door so much. I talk about money all the time. And I think that before I had that conversation with him, I was very shy about talking about money. People would bring it up and I'd be like, ha ha ha, okay, how's the weather? And that came from sheer anxiety and insecurity. Your body and your spirit and your soul knows when something's not right. They may not be able to define what's not right, but if you're in a conversation and someone brings up a topic and you find every way to change the topic or leave the conversation, that's a trigger to you. And you should really look at why that topic is triggering you. And so before this conversation, that was me. We go to happy hour with my friends. I would be at work. We talk about promos and all this stuff. And I would try to change the conversation.
Just deflect.
Deflect. I think I knew on a cellular level, I'm not doing this right. And at the time, I was not ready to tackle that until a few years later. But then when I started tackling it, I started to have more open conversations about money. And it's interesting when you have more open conversations about money, the support, the help, the new tips and tricks you receive from other people. And maybe that's a life lesson, regardless of the topic, is that if you tackle the insecurity and you tackle the trigger, your world's going to be opened up in some very affirming ways.
Oh, we agree. It's so great. Lexi, let's go into the future. You have a child and you mentioned you got to start having money conversations at 5 years old. I love this. Describe how you're going to approach having money conversations.
I've already started them. I tell people I birthed a Black bougie magical fairy from Wakanda, disguised as a child. I remember finding out that I was pregnant and the conversations about money already started. I took Davy's advice, the financial advisor, and when I actively decided to start dating more intentionally, money was always a topic of conversation in some form or fashion, directly or indirectly, in my dating journey. So I ended up marrying this really cool human. We are also very aligned on money. So when we were engaged and got married and we're thinking about having kids, we were very much on the same page of what this looks like. And again, those conversations aren't about money. What type of lifestyle do we want our child to have? I will use the private and public school example because that's one of the easiest black and white examples for most people to understand in the United States. If you have a baby with someone who really wants their kid to go to public school, which is fantastic, and you want your kid to go to private school, those are two very different money conversations that actually impact your daily lives. Because the person who wants their kid to go to public school, regardless of what their reasoning is, that is a different budget than the person who wants their kid to go to private school. So when my husband and I were dating, we didn't have dollar conversations, but we had conversations like that. So if we get together and have a baby, how do you want this baby raised? What are the important things in this baby's lifestyle for you? My husband is not from the United States, and he's traveled and lived all over the world. I remember by the end of the appetizer of our first date, I thought, okay, if we end up getting together and I have a baby by you, am I ready to passport a 2-year-old around the world? Because that is a non-negotiable for you. Now, first glance, that's not a money conversation. But guess what? It costs money to passport that child to wherever. We were having those conversations. So I always tell folks that my magical fairy from Wakanda, we've been having conversations with her about money before she existed, talking to our financial advisor and making sure that before she came out the womb, that there were certain trusts in place. We had a 529 in place, conversations about our will. God forbid something happens to us. Is she financially secure, and where does that money go and how it gets to her? With my years of financial education, knowing that when you die, it's not as simple as, well, because you're my kid, you get all this stuff. How do we make sure that you're not paying taxes on the house that I give you? Where does my stock go? My husband and I both work in tech, so we do receive stock with our salaries. I think directly speaking to her about money, it's happening right now. I mean, she's a baby, so I don't know if she understands all the words that come out of my mouth every day.
But you're practicing.
We're practicing, but we will be having these conversations very early. I do not think that a 3-year-old needs to think about a 529. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that a 3-year-old, if they can walk and talk, they can understand that the toy they want in the store costs money.
Well, Lexi, you've been demonstrating the importance of productive money conversation, and it's been a joy to be in one with you. Tell us, what is your next money conversation going to be, and who's it going to be with?
Well, my next money conversation, to be very, very frank, is my real estate agent. My husband and I are very big on real estate investment. We bought our first home together in April 2022 as an investment property. We're currently actually building on the home so we can rent out this home, and then we're building an ADU in the back, which, to be honest, for people, I forgot what that stands for, but basically it's a tiny home.
Or accessory dwelling unit.
So people are like, what's an ADU? And I'm like, I don't, stop asking difficult questions. It's a house. I'm building a house. And so therefore we have 2 units on one piece of property. So my next money conversation is talking to our real estate agent of where we are going to live after we rent out these places in the next 6 months. And that is a money conversation. How much money are we willing to put down? Depending on how much that is that liquid from the bank, or is that we're selling some shares? So that money conversation is with the real estate agent, but it's also with our financial advisor. What does that look like? And then also we meet with our financial advisor once a month. So right now, what's really top of mind is daycare and how to pay for this kid, which is very expensive. These children are wild when it comes to money. So I live in an area of the country where it's common for daycare to be $5,000 to $8,000 a month. And that is an expense that I did not have before I gave birth. And so a lot of our conversations right now are also about making sure that we do not have anxiety every month over paying this bill. In the next 6 to 8 months, those are the continued combos.
Lexi B, you are amazing. Before we let you go, would you share the best place for our listeners to find you?
You can find me at my website at www.lexib.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Lexi B. I share many times on LinkedIn just tips and tricks on the crazy thoughts in my head about career development. and also more importantly about knowing your why. Then I also have a podcast called Sit with Lexi B, where I bring in leaders around the world. And every episode we talk about a lesson they've learned that has transformed their life on YouTube. And you can find that at Sit with Lexi B.
Lexi, thank you for joining us on Money Tales and being a role model for having comfortable, fun, productive money conversations.
Thank you for having me. And I just want to say before we close, what you both are doing is so transformative. And I really can't thank you enough. I am a Capricorn, so I do not give out a lot of compliments. I usually think that humans are horrible. So I hope you take that deeply. I want you to keep continuing doing what you do, because a whole lot of us, regardless of race, creed, sexuality, where we come from, what food we eat, and if it is seasoned or not, do not talk about money. And that's really hindering society. So I really appreciate you for uplifting and encouraging these conversations.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening, and leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Asperient. Go to asperient.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@asperient.com. See you next time.